Well, hello and good morning. Welcome to another Sunday morning coffee with Dr. Childress here. Today I'm going to be discussing lies because this is a pathology of lies uh, in the family courts. Everything about it is a lie. And the foundation of that is because the pathology is a delusional disorder. It's a persecutory delusion induced in the child by the allied narcissistic borderline dark personality parent. And a delusional disorder is a false reality. Okay, that's the person is out of touch with reality. And in this case, there's a false belief in victimization. There's your DSM 5 code. It's a 297.1 delusional disorder persecutory type. In addition, excuse me, this pathology is a factitious or false attachment pathology that's being imposed on the child by the allied narcissistic borderline parent. It's a factitious disorder imposed on another, FDIA, and there's your DSM diagnostic code for the factitious disorder. So this is the pathology in the family courts represents two major psychiatric disorders. Okay, and the primary one we can focus on is the delusional disorder. That's a diagnosis, affirmative diagnosis. You can actually pop it out in the session and look at it. But the factitious attachment pathology, factitious disorder imposed on another, is also there for primary and secondary gain to the allied parent. The primary gain from imposing a false pathology on the child is to meet their own emotional and psychological needs. For the narcissistic parent, often narcissistic dad, it's to restore their narcissistic defense of grandiosity and entitlement. I'm not the rejected person, you are. You're being rejected by your own children. And then for the borderline spectrum version, often a borderline mom, the secondary gain is the fear of abandonment, resolving the fear of abandonment. I've got the children, and you can go off, and um, but I'm not being abandoned. So that's the primary gain for inducing false pathology in the child. The secondary gain from doing that is spousal abuse of the targeted parent, using the child as a weapon. That's particularly the narcissistic dad variant, dark triad, dark triad and dark tetrad, narcissistic, psychopathic, Machiavellian manipulation, and sadistic. And so they'll often use the child as a weapon of spousal abuse, and that's the secondary gain for creating the pathology in the child. The other is to use the child as to manipulate, or the child's pathology to manipulate the court's decisions regarding child custody because the child's rejecting the targeted parent. And these are the most manipulative people on the planet. Narcissistic, borderline, dark personalities. Symptom feature of dark personalities was Machiavellian manipulation. So, yeah, they're creating the false pathology to manipulate the court's decision making. So this is a false pathology. It's a delusional disorder. It's not a true reality. It's in the psychotic domain of things. It's an encapsulated persecutory delusion. It's not widespread, and it's from trauma. It's not from schizophrenia type. It's a trauma-oriented delusion. The person has a distorted perception based on their childhood trauma, and they see dangers where none exist. That's your delusion. And it's a factitious attachment pathology. This is a pathology of lies. Now, if anyone tells you that the pathology is not in the DSM 5, that's a lie. It is. It's in two places, more actually, but it's major psychiatric disorders. It's in the DSM 5. They're just not assessing for it. The pathology in the family courts is child abuse. Okay, either when a child rejects a parent, either the targeted parent is abusive and abusing the child in some way, and thereby that's resulting in the child seeking to flee from that parent, the child rejecting that parent, or The allied parent is psychologically abusing the child by inducing the persecutory delusion and false or factitious attachment pathology in the child. And so there's your DSM diagnosis for that. 995.51, child psychological abuse. So again, if somebody tells you this is not in the DSM-5, yes, it is. I got 3 diagnoses for it: 2 major psychiatric disorders and child abuse. Okay, but the pathology lies. It's narcissistic, borderline dark, and it's a pathology of lies. Now, one of the problems we run into is using euphemisms for child abuse. It is not inappropriate affection syndrome. It is child sexual abuse. It is not overly harsh discipline dynamic. It is child physical abuse. And it is not parental alienation, resist, refuse dynamic, or parent-child contact problems. It's child psychological abuse. If someone tells you the pathology is anything but child abuse, that's a lie. It's child abuse. It's not something else. It's not bad parenting. It's child abuse. And when child abuse is the pathology, say child abuse. If you hide the child abuse behind these euphemisms, the court doesn't know that it's child abuse, and we can't get treatment for the child abuse. We need to start using the accurate words and from the DSM-5: delusional disorder, factitious disorder, child abuse. Withholding the child abuse diagnosis covers up the child abuse. We need to start using that word, and we need to anchor it into actual DSM-5 diagnoses. Now, in addition, the pathology in the family courts is spousal psychological abuse of the targeted parent using the child as a spousal abuse weapon. And there's your DSM-5 diagnosis number for that: spouse or partner abuse psychological, 295.82. So there's 4 diagnoses: delusional thought disorder, factitious disorder imposed on another, and then 2 abuse diagnoses: child abuse and spousal abuse. That needs to be assessed, please. Somebody, the mental health people, that's your job. The ones who work in the family courts, forensic custody evaluators, that's your, that's your job, is to die. We got one parent who's saying the other parent is, we got both parents saying the other parent is abusive. We got the targeted parent saying it's a delusional disorder. So can we get an assessment for that, please? If anyone tells you this isn't about you, that's a lie, because it's entirely about you. It's spousal abuse using the child as a weapon. And then in weaponizing the child, they create such significant pathology in the child, it becomes child abuse. Now, children love their parents. All children love their parents. And the child loves you. Of course, your child loves you. They're your mom, your dad. All children love their parents. If anyone, including the child, tells you the child doesn't love you, that's a lie. That's a pathology of lies. Now, let me explain what's going on for the child. When you breach an attachment bond, that creates grief at loss. So around the divorce, and there's families breaking up, there's going to be natural grief around divorce. That's normal. That's the emotion of sadness. Now, what the pathological allied parent does, they can't process grief and sadness very well. It turns into anger and resentment and stuff. That's their deficit. They do not process the emotion of sadness. So what they do is they take the child's sadness and turn it into anger and blame. The reason you're hurting is because of the targeted parent. They did bad things. They're a bad parent. They're inadequate. And they create a persecutory thought belief in the child. They twist up the sadness. Now, the child feels hurt, but they don't know why they feel hurt. It's just normal sadness at the loss of family and stuff. But the pathological parent twists them up in their attribution of why they feel hurt. into this delusional disorder. And now they have this belief that you're somehow a bad parent. And they say, I don't love it. No, 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 no. All we need to do is restore that bond again, the breach and repair. We fix the bond, and the child goes, oh my goodness, it's not because you're a bad parent. It's because I was just sad. I get it now. And what's the treatment for sadness? Get a hug. We need to fix the relationship. Tronic and gold, the power of discord. Tronic and gold. We always fix relationships. Repair is where the action is. Breach and repair sequence. Mental health people, if you don't know Tronic, shame on you. We always fix relationships. So we just fix it. But we first need to fix it on an accurate diagnosis. What's the diagnosis? Child abuse. It's a delusional thought disorder being created in the child. We need to identify the child abuse so we can protect the child. But when the child says, I don't love you, that's a lie. Don't believe the child. Don't go off into the delusion down the rabbit hole with them. No, you can't necessarily directly confront that because it's a pathology. I mean, the child's going to say, no, 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 you did bad things, and they're delusional. But you don't have to participate in it. So you can have faith and trust that the child loves you. Of course they do. Your mom, your dad. Don't get lost in the lies. Colluding with child abuse. Oh, the mental health professionals. Such bad, bad, bad. If the involved mental health professionals believe a shared delusion, then they become part of the shared delusion. They become part of the pathology. And when that pathology is child abuse, they become part of the child abuse by validating to the child that the induced persecutory delusion is true. And when the pathology is the spousal psychological abuse of the targeted parent, they become part of the spousal abuse because of their misdiagnosis. So I want to be very, very clear on this. The involved mental health professionals are participants in child abuse. They're child abusers, the mental health people in the family courts. Oh my goodness. We shouldn't have child abusers treating the children in the family courts. No, because of their incompetence. They just don't know what the pathology is. They don't know the necessary knowledge about attachment, delusional thought, and they just believe the shared delusion because they're ignorant and incompetent. And so they become part of the spousal abuse as well. Because they don't identify the child abuse and don't make it stop. Okay, so it's really bad in the family courts with the mental health people. Oh my goodness. So the court-involved mental health professionals are colluding participants in child abuse and spousal abuse of the targeted parent because of their negligently incompetent misdiagnosis. And that's the truth. Oh my goodness, it is so bad. Now, we need to assess for the child abuse. We need to get a proper assessment. In all cases of court-involved custody conflict involving severe attachment pathology displayed by the child, a child rejecting a parent, a proper risk assessment for child abuse needs to be conducted to the appropriate differential diagnosis for each parent. So the appropriate differential diagnosis here is either the targeted parent is abusing the child in some way, thereby creating the child's attachment pathology towards that parent. And if that's a yes, identify the type of child abuse, physical, sexual, neglect, psychological. We'll put it on a treatment plan and we'll fix it. Or is the allied parent psychologically abusing the child by creating a shared induced persecutory delusion and false factitious attachment pathology in the child? Now, we can even get more specific on the allied parent. So, on the delusional disorder, does the allied parent have an encapsulated persecutory delusion regarding the targeted parent? And does the child share this persecutory belief, i.e., a fixed and false belief that the child is being malevolently treated in some way? DSM-5 diagnosis, delusional disorder. And for the factitious disorder, does the child have a false factitious attachment pathology imposed on the child by the pathogenic parenting of the allied parent? Pathogenic, pathology creating. And there's your DSM diagnostic code for that. And then the spousal abuse. Is the allied parent using the child's induced pathology and induced persecutory delusion and factitious attachment pathology as a weapon of spousal emotional and psychological abuse of the targeted parent? And there's your diagnosis for that. Now, this is just yes or no. I would recommend you get those questions, you give it to the court and say, Your Honor, we need these answered. Any mental health professional is involved, you give them this just little checklist, yes or no, and say, I'd like the answers to this question, please. You're the licensed mental health professional. These are psychiatric disorders and child abuse and spousal abuse. You're responsible for protecting the child. You're responsible for protecting me. You're responsible for getting an accurate diagnosis. And so answer the questions. And if you can't answer the questions, then you need to refer to somebody who can answer the questions. This is child abuse and spousal abuse. So if you can't answer these questions, you are not competent with the pathology, because these are the questions that need to be answered. You've got the worst mental health professionals imaginable working in the family courts, and the court should not tolerate it. The court should say, one of my litigants wants clear answers. And you know what? As a court, I want clear answers. I want to know which parent's abusing the child. I want answers on this. And so these custody evaluations, the forensic custody evaluators who work in the family courts, get them to answer this. And hopefully in less than 20 to 40,000, 6 to 9 months, they can do it in 4 to 6 weeks. And if they know what to do, and you can go to my website and get, the diagnostic series. I explain how to diagnose a delusional, the thought disorder, a factitious disorder, child abuse, attachment pathology. I got seminars on explaining how to diagnose that, if they want to learn how to diagnose it. But right now, they're just colluding with the child abuse and taking money to do it. It's amazing. So right now, everybody else, ADHD, autism, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, everybody else gets diagnosis and treatment. You, in the family courts, get something called a forensic custody evaluation that does not diagnose and does not lead to treatment. And withholding the child abuse diagnosis from the targeted parent and the court is collusion with the child abuse. They are colluding with the child abuse by hiding it, by covering it up and not identifying it for the court's decision making or for the targeted parent to be able to advocate and protect their child, and so they can protect the child and treat it and resolve the child abuse. And withholding the spousal abuse diagnosis is collusion with the spousal abuse. If you're a mental health professional and you're working with this family pathology and you don't tell the parents and the court and everybody about the spousal abuse by the allied parent using the child as a weapon, DSM-5 995.82, spouse or partner abuse psychological. And if you withhold that diagnosis and don't tell anybody, you're participating, you're colluding in covering up the child abuse and spousal abuse. So the pathology in the family courts is child psychological abuse. That's the truth. The pathology in the family courts is spousal psychological abuse using the child as the spousal abuse weapon. That's the truth. Okay. So this is a pathology of lies. We need to anchor back in the truth. These mental health people who say, I'm professional, I'm competent because I've been here 40 years. You've been misdiagnosing the pathology for 40 years. You're lying. Look at your Vita. You're not competent in attachment. You're not competent in delusional thought disorders. It's a pathology of lies. And the mental health people are lying to everybody saying, I know what I'm doing. No, you don't. And every single one of these cases should involve a child abuse diagnosis, either by the targeted parent, and the child's got an authentic desire to flee the targeted parent, or else it's a false or factitious attachment pathology and a persecutory delusion, and you've got psychological abuse by the allied parent. The attachment system is a motivational system. All motivational systems have direction. And the reason the attachment system seeks to bond to the parent is because the other direction is death by starvation and predation. That's the emergence of a primary motivational system. The only thing that causes a child to seek to flee from a parent is child abuse, abusive range parenting. Okay, so it's either abusive by the targeted parent or by the allied parent. We just need to know which one. So let's get a proper assessment on that. That's the responsibility of the forensic custody evaluators. They're coming to Seattle in May, and I hope to have that discussion with them when they arrive. So with that, I'm headed off to the rest of my Sunday. Good luck, everybody, and it's up to the mental health people who work the family courts to do their job. So with that, take care and good luck.